do you know what comes next? At age 33, you are feeling restless and defeated maybe in your job. Lately, you've been fantasizing about different careers. You've been entertaining the idea of having children, and you're not sure you want to put off parenting. But how to choose and how to manage the overwhelm of a career change? How does parenthood fit into this picture? At age 78, you are pondering if now is the time to move on from the home where you raised your family. You know you need more help, but assisted living, it just seems so final. Is this the right step? The right time? You feel pretty good, but then again, you don't want to fall someday and have the decision made for you. At age 26, you've been dating someone seriously for a year, but you're not sure where your career is heading yet. You've been thinking about grad school. Your partner's income is not enough to support you both. Should you move? Get married? And how do you know when you're ready for marriage? At age 66, you retired a few months ago. You no longer feel as exhausted as you have these last 5 years, nor do you miss the striving of your former lifestyle. Yet you are beginning to find your days stretching out before you with little to occupy your time and energy. You still have much to offer and contribute. You must find something worthwhile to fill your time, but what? These types of quandaries call for a habit of spiritual discernment. This is the time to get real monastic, monk-like. It's not just decision-making. See, discernment is a word ministers use all the time, in addition to words like call. But I wonder if we all really know what we're saying when we talk about discernment. I have long been inspired by the monastic practices of the Jesuits, so I thought I would share some of their ancient discernment practices with you. That's what we did earlier. It was like a UU'd up version of the Awareness Examen, which is sort of a central prayer for the Jesuit Society. My favorite saints that I learned about in seminary were the ones who made practical use of their faith, and no one is better known for this than Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the patron saint of spiritual retreats. Inigo de Loyola was born in the Basque region of Spain in 1491. He distinguished himself as a young scholar who served at court, dreaming of becoming a knight and hero. And after being wounded quite early at the Battle of Pamplona, he was bedridden for the entire next year. While convalescing at the castle, he asked for books about chivalry, but all they had were books about Christ and biographies of various saints. The young soldier had always dreamed of imitating heroes, but now his heroes had names like Francis of Assisi and Catherine of Siena and Teresa of Avalon. When he was well enough, he traveled to the shrine of Our Lady of Montserrat with newfound zeal to serve God, where he kept vigil all night. He laid his sword dramatically on the altar and gave his fine clothes to a poor man, casting aside his life as a noble soldier, and he became a poor pilgrim. He famously spent time in a cave for a while. This seemed like part of the deal in those days. If you were going to, become elevated in some way, you had to go to the cave. A cave at Manresa where he began writing his spiritual exercises. The spiritual exercises then became a compilation of prayers, meditations, and other contemplative practices meant for spiritual directors. Yes, this is in the early 1500s. Spiritual directors who guide people through a process of reflective prayer. This series of exercises focused on the idea that stretching oneself spiritually is as important as an athlete's conditioning routine. After many years of schooling, he began, many years, I'm just skimming this here. He began a new order of priestly spiritual scholars, the Society of the Jesuits, which Pope Paul III made a formal religious order in 1540. For the next 15 years, he led the Society of Jesuits from Rome and grew them to over 1,000 brothers. Jesuit schools and churches were founded all over Europe, as well as in the West and Brazil. And after his death, a pope, does it really matter which pope, canonized him in 1622, like one of them did that. I love Ignatius's hero's journey, where he dreams of being a military champion, becomes bedridden, and realizes greatness can be achieved through internal tests of strength. St. Ignatius of Loyola was concerned with something Star Wars fans understand as the Force, or Wheel of Time fans might understand as the one power. I thought somebody might say it. The one power. An energy you can connect with, that if harnessed, if practiced, and built a relationship with, well, it can move mountains for you. If you look for the presence of the holy in and around us, you will deepen in your own self-awareness. You will become more reflective and fine-tune your own responses to this energy. I'm starting to feel like you haven't watched The Wheel of Time, and you definitely need to. Or read it. This is not about self-improvement, friends. This is not self-help. This is not self-assessment. I'm not giving you one more thing on the list of things to do and worry about. Oh, yeah. Do spiritual discernment. This is not that. This is about spiritual freedom. Discernment can become a way of life, just like another sense, a sixth sense in a way, and spiritual freedom is one of its most precious fruits. How might you recognize spiritual freedom's presence in your life? What does that really feel like to know spiritual freedom? Well, theologian Thomas Ryan points to 4 signs of its presence in your life. Spiritual freedom is marked by self-acceptance, the kind of self-acceptance that allows you to be at ease with others so much that it puts them at ease with themselves in your presence. And spiritual freedom is about living your own calling to the fullest. People who are spiritually free are tantalizingly alive. They can take bold initiatives. They are not paralyzed by the prospect of failure, and they can withstand great criticism. They are on their path. They are following their call. People who are spiritually free are also free from unhealthy attachments, such as self-centeredness, addiction, or desire for power. And finally, the mark of spiritual freedom is just a daily rededication of your life to the path of living with sacred depth. So spending some time each day in prayerful discernment about what comes next and how to follow your most essential call. So imagine what a community of spiritually free people would look like and feel like. We would love each other equally, but also we would love uniquely. So we would come to prize diversity as absolutely necessary for the thriving of this community. We would support each other's discernment. We would ask thick questions of one another. What is a thick question? Any third graders out there? Or third grade teachers? In the Georgia Education Standards for third grade, some of you know how I know this, English language arts students learn to tell the difference between thin questions and thick questions. Thin questions stay superficial. They are questions that are obvious, or they're used just to evaluate a piece of literature. What color was the protagonist's hair? Did you like the book? By the way, I'm part of a book club that has one rule. Well, there's a few rules, but the main rule is never ask if you like the book, and never say if you like the book. That's not a thick question. Thick questions ask something that is deeper. It goes deep beyond the obvious. Why did the character take this action? How did that action affect the others? What was the protagonist's main goal? And how did it affect you, the reader? At UUCA, we can become a place where we challenge ourselves and challenge each other to ask the thick questions. Now, I found the unhelpfully confusing dictionary definition of discernment to be quite helpful, actually, and intriguing. Webster offers two definitions side by side. First, discernment can mean the ability to judge well. The second definition reads, perception in the absence of judgment. So which is it? Judging or perceiving? The Myers-Briggs personality test puts perception and judgment on polar opposite ends. But discernment, I think, brings them together. Discernment is a practice of aligning your heart knowledge, your perceptions, your felt knowledge with your judging mind. If you can achieve alignment, your life will then deepen into fulfilling a sacred call. And when you are following a call, well, the smaller decisions just become easy, obvious. So here are some thicker questions that can help you with discernment. How can I be most myself? What do I really desire? What is the desire beneath that desire? What feels most true to who I really am or who I really want to be? Now, the way of discernment includes 7 steps. I'm going to try and break it all down for you that can become a practice. And by the way, much of this is based on Elizabeth Liebert's fabulous book, The Way of Discernment, which maybe I'll teach this year. I really want to. But this is how discernment can become a practice, reorienting your life towards this attunement, towards depth. 1, seek spiritual freedom. That's the first practice. Seek attunement with the force, with love's power, with God, with nature. What does this mean, by the way? How do you seek attunement with nature? I have a friend who is a spiritual naturalist, and what this means is often if she happens upon, like while she's hiking, if she happens upon an intact snake skin, she'll probably end up dumping her boyfriend. or upend her life in some way, in some very profound way. Because obviously that is what the snakeskin is telling her. Now, I am making light of this, but the snakeskin's presence is really merely confirming something she was already considering. But she reaches towards that wisdom. She desires it. And that is what it means to seek spiritual freedom. So you could walk by the snakeskin and think, that's cool snakeskin. I'm going to keep walking. Or you could walk by the snakeskin and receive it as a sign for your life. That something in this world has a desire for you. And all you have to do is follow that call. Okay, so that's the first, seek spiritual freedom. The second step is to discover and name the issue you face. What is really at stake is not always self-evident at first glance. So really, what is it you're really talking about? And what's beneath that desire? And what's beneath it further still? Okay, the third piece of work is to gather and evaluate data about the issue. This is like mostly what people do. This is mostly all they do when they're making a decision. Gather the data. But with discernment, gathering data is just one piece. See, decision-making and discernment are not the same thing. It is very possible to botch a decision, make a bad decision, while still moving forward in your discernment process. In fact, oftentimes discernment requires missteps or taking left turns. I think the song set that up beautifully. The next step is to reflect and pray. This requires a lot of meditation or prayer, time for quiet reflection. And the thing you pray for is spiritual freedom and to reflect on the data you've collected. This is before you act. You're just thinking and reflecting. You're meditating. You're breathing with the ideas. Just meditate on what is beneath your data and what is deeper still underneath that. Okay, the next step is to formulate a tentative decision. I have to publish this sermon. This is a lot of steps. Okay, the next step is to formulate a tentative decision. Okay, so you're thinking you might know where you're going. Here's the decision. The next step is to seek confirmation. They call this test the leadings. That's what they call this. Bring the decision to your community of faith, to your small group ministry, to your covenant group, to us. Bring it to us. Discern the discernment with people who will ask you thick questions about that. And finally, assess. Assess the process. This is more prayerful reflection. Still, the discernment continues. Now, this whole path and process may seem complicated, but if practiced, it can lead to a life where the path just seems to open up before you with ease. Now, I will admit that I have been personally in deep discernment about how to impact the system of policing here in Atlanta. And this issue of Cop City, which is complex and it is multifaceted. I mean, the Atlanta Police Foundation, largely funded by national corporations headquartered here in Atlanta, well, they're accountable only to its funders. They've disregarded the will of the voters. Then we have city council members who have not always been transparent or nor truly open to citizens' questions and concerns about the facility. We have police and state prosecutors who have committed aggressive oversteps in dealing with civil disobedience and community protests to this facility. And the residents who will have to live near the police training facility, well, they are largely vocal that they do not want it in their neighborhood. And we are still no closer to justice for Tortuguita, the young forest protector activist who was killed by police last year. And our fire department deserves a state-of-the-art training facility. And some of the facility will be used to implement implicit bias training and racial justice education to our police force. And don't we want that? Although you could argue that training could happen anywhere. Does not require a whole new facility. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I have felt mounting pressure to get more deeply involved, and just this week, 2 of my beloved colleagues in ministry were arrested and held in the DeKalb County Jail for 2 days and 2 nights as a result of their civil disobedience. This is a matter that has required discernment, not a knee-jerk reaction. If you are still in discernment on these issues, I honor your process. And your authentic desire, your desire for a city without violence, where all can feel safe, protected, and served by our law enforcement agencies, all. There is a lot of brokenness in Atlanta right now. And for this moment, I am choosing in my discernment process to sit with the brokenness. And do what I can to support our right to assemble, to push for a public referendum, and to maintain the people's right to lift our voices in protest. And I worry about being misunderstood because my position can be very nuanced. And at this moment, I don't have an easy answer for you, or a simple response that you can join as a member of UUCA. What I do have is a deep commitment to go deep into the issues with you, to question anytime the issues are oversimplified, and to stay in the conversation. Will you do that with me? My holy call is not to offer you a simple solution or a sound bite for you to argue for or against, but to invite you into an experience where you can deepen your understanding of the issue and find your own way through it. Your own discernment. So I encourage you to ask the thick questions of one another about this police training facility and about the community's response. Deepen your self-reflection and your own self-awareness on the issue. Where are you coming from? What's your social location? What stakes do you have? Listen more often than speak. Learn all that you can and keep learning. Find ways to experience in real time the various actions that are taking place at least weekly around our city. And seek alignment with your deepest self, with your own core values, and the place where the sacred is calling you. What is my favorite thing about good old Ignatius of Loyola? Well, he didn't believe discernment was a solitary practice. I mean, he went to the cave for a minute, but ultimately he came back to the brothers. He honored the wisdom of community. He encouraged group retreats and group reflections, sitting together in the quiet wisdom, asking thick questions of one another in an eternal process of depth and discovery. So welcome to spiritual discernment breaking through in your life. Welcome to the deeper waters of our own self-awareness. And like most things done well, you don't have to do it alone. I want to close with a poem, a prayer called Ignatius and the Stars, a prayer for the close of an Ignatian year. Before the vigil at Montserrat, before the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, before the foundations of the society, there was a man on a castle balcony gazing up in wonder at the stars. Saint Ignatius, awed by mystery, draw our eyes ever upward to the heavens, our hearts to the holy adventures that await us, and our spirits to the grandeur that surrounds us. May we too see all things within us and beyond us as sacred galaxies formed and held this year, this day, and always by loving hands. Amen.